After the Alaska summit, action has shifted to the Oval Office. Donald Trump will meet Zelensky and European leaders. Will it be drama or diplomacy? A handshake or another shouting match? We'll be tracking that. Also looking back at the Alaska showdown, it was Vantage Putin. We will tell you why. What will a Ukraine peace deal look like and why the possibility of peace centers on the Donbas? Also tonight, the Alaska summit's top 6 viral videos, from a clapping president to American stealth bombers. What is the internet talking about? Back home, Putin picks up the phone, briefing Prime Minister Modi on what went down in Alaska. We'll tell you why it matters for India. Plus, decoding the art of the deal Putin style. Also in New Delhi, China's foreign minister is visiting. We will discuss what's on the agenda. What's the GST reform that has stocks soaring in India, and what does it mean for you? And the new Gen Alpha words that have made it to the dictionary. All this and more coming up. The headlines first. China lashes out at Germany, warns Berlin against inciting confrontation and hyping up tensions after the German foreign minister accused China of aggression in the Asia-Pacific region. He cited Beijing's behavior in the Taiwan Strait and the East and South China Seas. Myanmar's junta sets 28th of December as the poll date. The announcement comes amid a raging civil war which has put much of the country out of its control. The junta has offered cash rewards to opposition fighters who are willing to give up their arms ahead of the vote. US President Donald Trump targets mail-in ballots, says he will lead a movement against it. Trump wants to eliminate the voting method before next year's midterm elections. He has spent years railing against it, even though he has voted by mail himself. Nearly a third of America uses mail-in ballots. Egypt says it is willing to join a potential international force deployed to Gaza, but only if it is backed by a UN Security Council resolution. This comes as Hamas negotiators in Cairo received a new ceasefire proposal. The plan calls for an initial 60-day truce and release of hostages in 2 batches. And Iran's president is in Armenia to hold talks on a corridor linking Azerbaijan with its enclave near Iran's border. The land corridor is part of a peace deal which was signed by Armenia and Azerbaijan in the US earlier this month. Tehran has long opposed this transit route.
What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel.
It was quite the Friday for Volodymyr Zelensky. The Ukrainian president was sitting by the phone waiting for just about any update. After all, thousands of kilometers away, his country's future was being decided. On Friday night, Donald Trump met Russian President Vladimir Putin. The meeting was in Alaska, a summit to end the war in Ukraine. It did not end with an immediate ceasefire, but a flurry of diplomacy followed. Trump dialed Zelensky, he called the NATO leaders. There were intense discussions. And now the Ukrainian president has landed in Washington, D.C. In about an hour from now, he will meet Donald Trump. Of course, this won't be easy for him. The last time he was here, things spiraled. Zelensky met Donald Trump at the Oval Office. It turned into a shouting match. Trump called him reckless. He accused Zelensky of gambling with World War III. The meeting had to be cut short and Zelensky walked out in haste. It looked like Washington-Kiev ties needed some desperate CPR.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III. And what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country, that's backed you far more than a lot of people said they should have.
Have you said thank you once this entire meeting?
And yet, here he is again. Zelensky will step into the White House again for another round with Donald Trump. But this time, he's not going alone. With Zelensky is a parade of European leaders. They will all attend the meeting with him because this one is too important to fail. A lot hinges on this meeting. The future of Ukraine, the future of Europe, and what the post-war continent will look like. So let's break it down for you tonight. First of all, who is coming with Zelensky? Like I said, an entire entourage of European leaders. There's UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, French President Emmanuel Macron, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, Finnish President Alexander Stubb, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, and EU President Ursula von der Leyen.
Ultimately, our desire tomorrow is to present a united front between Europeans and Ukrainians at this moment of conflict resolution, reaffirming who is on the side of peace, who is on the side of international law. But above all, how can we collectively ensure that the international order is respected and that our collective security is protected?
We've got to make sure there is peace, that it is lasting peace, and that it is fair and that it is just. And that's why I'm travelling to Washington with other European leaders to discuss this face-to-face with President Trump and President Zelensky, because it's in everyone's interests, it's in the UK's interests that we get this right.
This is the first of its kind meeting, the first time such a big EU delegation is heading to Washington on such short notice. They all want to project unity, maybe to prevent another Oval Office ambush. So EU leaders are there as guardrails, not battering rams. They cannot directly confront Trump, but their very presence shows how much is at stake. However, the White House has bigger things to worry about at the moment, like is Zelensky going to wear a suit? Last time this was a point of contention, so this time the Trump administration is already clearing the air. They want him to wear a suit and tie to this meeting. But the Ukrainian president obviously has different priorities. For Zelensky, the starting line is simple: stop the nightly missile barrages. Just yesterday, Russian strikes killed 10 people in Ukraine. So for Kiev, priority number one is a ceasefire. And Europe agrees with this. But again, Trump is not on board. He has gone cold on the ceasefire first idea. Instead, he is talking about a permanent peace deal, one that skips the pause button altogether. And for Kiev, this is a nightmare scenario. How do you negotiate when bombs are literally falling? Which brings us to what Ukraine wants. On paper, Ukraine's ideal peace deal is crystal clear. Full restoration of all occupied land, that's Crimea, Donbas, Zaporizhia, Kherson, and all others. But the ground reality may not allow this. Remember, this is a war that has gone on for more than 3 years. The borders have changed. Kiev may have Western weapons, but it does not have the manpower. It cannot win this land back in a war. And that would mean ceding Donbas and Crimea. In fact, Trump has already hinted at it. In a post on Truth Social, he said, and I quote, "Remember how it started. No getting back Obama given Crimea and no going into NATO by Ukraine. Some things never change." So Trump is already stating the obvious, but Zelensky remains defiant, at least for now.
Since the territorial issue is so important, it should be discussed only by the leaders of Ukraine and Russia at the trilateral Ukraine, United States, Russia. So far, Russia gives no sign that trilateral will happen, and if Russia refuses, then new sanctions must follow.
But that's not the only concession that Kiev will be making. Look at the second part of the post. No going into NATO by Ukraine. That's what Trump wrote. That's something that Zelensky has rallied for. Kiev joining NATO. Russia would say that's how the war began, with Ukraine's NATO ambitions and the West indulging it. But looks like he will have to forget about it. Instead, there's talk of a makeshift security guarantee package.
It means that the United States is potentially prepared to be able to give Article 5 security guarantees, but not from NATO, directly from the United States and other European countries. That is big. I mean, really big.
Does it mean boots on the ground? What does it mean, but logistically?
I think part of the discussion that we're going to have on Monday throughout the day, because there's going to be breakout sessions there, is exactly the specifics of what the Ukrainians feel that they need. Because remember, as mediators, we were at this summit to advance the Ukrainian position, and we did that, and we did it successfully.
And that's why today matters so much. If Trump can get Zelensky to swallow the Donbas loss, it would set a precedent. That land can be taken by force, and the West will eventually sign off. So while the Trump-Putin meet in Alaska grabbed the headlines, the Washington meeting may decide the end game. If Ukraine holds its ground, it may emerge battered but intact. If not, it will walk out weaker than it walked in. Today's meeting is basically part two. Part one was on Friday. Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin met in Alaska. All eyes were on the outcome of that summit. But after 3 hours of talks, who came out on top? The short answer, Vladimir Putin. It wasn't as clear on Friday, though. First, it seemed like the whole thing was pointless, that no one got anything. But over the weekend, more announcements came in, more statements on Truth Social. So 2 days later, the verdict is clear. Putin was the winner in Alaska. And I will give you 4 reasons why. Number one, the optics. Trump rolled out the red carpet in Alaska. He welcomed Vladimir Putin with a warm handshake and fly-pasts. This was impossible 1 year ago. The US spent 3 years trying to isolate Putin. They pushed for an arrest warrant against him. But now look at things. The Russian president was welcomed like a friend, like an ally of the United States. Reason number 2, why it was advantage Putin. Trump set a trap for himself. His initial strategy was perfect. He tried to downplay the expectations. The White House called it a listening exercise. Had Trump stuck to that, it would have been fine. No expectations, so no losses. But at the last minute, Trump made a U-turn. He issued a threat to Russia.
Will Russia face any consequences if Vladimir Putin does not agree to stop the war after your meeting on Friday?
Yes, they will. Yeah.
What will the consequences
there will be
be?
consequences.
Sanctions, tariffs?
There will be, I don't have to say, there will be very severe consequences.
That was on Wednesday before the meeting. Trump said this before the meeting. He warned of severe consequences if a ceasefire was not agreed. Obviously, there was no ceasefire in Alaska. What's more, Trump abandoned his call completely. Listen to what he said on Saturday, his message on Saturday. It was determined by all that the best way to end the horrific war between Russia and Ukraine is to go directly to a peace agreement which would end the war and not a mere ceasefire agreement, which oftentimes do not hold up. So Trump went into the meeting calling for a ceasefire, and he came out of the meeting saying that ceasefires do not hold up. This was a big concession by Trump, because this was always Russia's position. They have preferred a peace deal over a ceasefire. Then we come to reason number 3, why Putin won. He gave no concessions. His demands have been clear from the start. No NATO membership for Ukraine, limits on Ukraine's military, and recognizing Moscow's hold over newly occupied land. This is what he wanted. And he did not shift from those positions. He stuck to them.
We are convinced that for the Ukrainian settlement to be sustainable and long-term, all the root causes of the crisis, which have been discussed repeatedly, must be eliminated, all of Russia's legitimate concerns must be taken into account, and a fair balance in the security sphere in Europe and the world as a whole must be restored. We hope that Kyiv and the European capitals will perceive all of this in a constructive manner and will not create any obstacles or attempt to disrupt the emerging progress through provocations or behind-the-scenes intrigues.
So Putin did not concede anything. At the same time, he secured some gains. For starters, no more sanctions. Trump had threatened crippling secondary tariffs and sanctions, but his officials have now ruled them out. They say sanctions have not made a difference in 3 years. And secondly, some bilateral progress was made. Again, this was not on the table. It was not part of the agenda going into the meeting. Trump was only interested in talking about Ukraine, but Putin squeezed in other issues, like space and tech cooperation. Which brings us to the fourth reason why Russia had the advantage. Look at Trump's flip-flop after the summit. Before the talks, he was focused on convincing Putin. He wanted the Russians to end the war. But after the talks, that changed. Trump realized that he could not sway Putin. He admitted that no deal was struck.
There were many, many points that we agreed on, most of them, I would say, a couple of big ones that we haven't quite gotten there, but we've made some headway. So there's no deal until there's a deal. I will call up NATO in a little while. I will call up the various people that I think are appropriate, and I'll, of course, call up President Zelensky and tell him about today's meeting. It's ultimately up to them.
Cut to this morning. Look at Trump's social media post. I'm quoting. President Zelensky of Ukraine can end the war with Russia almost immediately if he wants to, or he can continue to fight. So now Trump is putting the onus on Ukraine. He says it is Zelensky who must end the war, which has also been Russia's position. Make concessions, end the war. If you add these four factors, one thing becomes quite clear. Trump was outplayed in Alaska, and it's not a surprise. Every peace talk is a product of the background. Look at the background to this one. Russia is making gains on the battlefield. Ukraine is low on soldiers and arms. The mediator, Donald Trump, clearly likes Putin more than Zelensky. Plus, his intentions are all over the place. Trump doesn't care how the war ends. He just wants credit when it ends. And since he cannot force Putin, he's turning to someone he can, Zelensky. In this background, Alaska was always going to end in one of two ways, with a Putin victory or as a dud. Trump is ready to give concessions to Putin, but Zelensky and the Europeans may not be on board. They have their own conditions. And they're ready to block any deal that looks one-sided. Now, given this gap in expectations, is a peace deal even possible? And if it is, what would it look like? Tonight, we'll try to examine that. What would a peace deal look like? Starting with the most basic question, what are the core issues, the key points that a potential deal must address? There are basically two things here. First, the status of Russian-occupied territories. And second, Ukraine's NATO ambitions, its demand for security guarantees. These are the two core issues. Let's start with the status of occupied territories. As of today, Russia has occupied almost 20% of Ukrainian land. These are the areas we're talking about. And out of these, Putin wants to keep a large part. He does not want to return a lot of this territory to Ukraine, especially Donetsk and Luhansk. Putin wants to keep them. These two regions make up what is called the Donbas. It's a key battlefront in this war. Russia currently occupies most of it, almost all of Luhansk, and around 3/4 of Donetsk. That's more than 46,000 square kilometers of land occupied by Russia. What about Ukraine? Well, it still controls a significant strip, around 6,600 square kilometers, mostly in Donetsk. And this is where the fighting is intense. Russia is pushing hard. It is trying to recapture the remaining Ukrainian strongholds. And Putin wants Kiev to withdraw completely from here to hand over the remaining territory to Moscow. So that's one part. The second is Crimea, and he did raise the status of Crimea. This is a peninsula that once belonged to Ukraine. Moscow occupied it in 2014. And now Putin says Crimea is Russian territory. He wants formal recognition of Russian territory. He wants the world to accept that Crimea is indeed a part of Russia. In return, Moscow is ready to make a concession. Here's what they will do. They will freeze the front lines in the south, in regions like Kherson and Zaporizhia. But even that comes with conditions. Putin has refused to agree to a ceasefire not until a final deal is in place. And that directly contradicts Ukraine's position. Zelensky wanted a ceasefire first. He wanted the strikes to stop, the daily drone attacks, the missile barrages. He wanted an end to all of it. And for a negotiation to begin only after the ceasefire. But Russia says no. It wants an all or nothing deal. And Putin seems to have Trump's support on this. Look at his statement on Truth Social. President Zelensky of Ukraine can end the war with Russia almost immediately if he wants to, or he can continue to fight. This is what Trump has said. So the onus has shifted to Zelensky now. Where does he stand on Russia's demands? Will he cede territory to end the war? Here's how the Ukrainian president responded.
Russia is still unsuccessful in Donetsk region. Putin has been unable to take it for 12 years. And the constitution of Ukraine makes it impossible to give up territory or trade land. Since the territorial issue is so important, it should be discussed only by the leaders of Ukraine and Russia at the trilateral Ukraine, United States, Russia. So far, Russia gives no sign that trilateral will happen, and if Russia refuses, then new sanctions must follow. Third, it's important that America agrees to work with Europe to provide security guarantees for Ukraine.
So there's no agreement on the issue of occupied territories. Then we come to the second core issue, that is security guarantees, and here's what it means. Ukraine wants assurances from the West. It wants protection in case Russia attacks again. But will the US agree to this? As of today, Washington says it is willing to step up. And that's according to the US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff. He gave an interview yesterday where he said Trump and Putin have agreed on security guarantees.
It means that the United States is potentially prepared to be able to give Article 5 security guarantees, but not from NATO, directly from the United States and other European countries. That is big. I mean, really big.
Does it mean boots on the ground? What does it mean? But logistically?
I think part of the discussion that we're going to have on Monday throughout the day, because there's going to be breakout sessions there, is exactly the specifics of what the Ukrainians feel that they need. Because remember, as mediators, we were at this summit to advance the Ukrainian position, and we did that. And we did it successfully. Now it's for us to drill down on the granular details of exactly what the Ukrainians need to give them a sense of security in the future, and, by the way, what the Europeans need as well.
Witkoff called them robust, but NATO won't give Ukraine any security guarantees. As for Kiev's bid to join NATO, that's out of the question now. Russia says it's a non-starter, and Western powers agree. So instead of NATO membership, Trump is proposing something else for Ukraine. He's proposing independent security guarantees. What does that mean? It means guarantees not from NATO, but independently from member states. So guarantees from the United States and some other European countries. If Russia attacks again, the US would respond. Some Europeans would respond too, but not all of NATO. That's what it means. This is a broad understanding. The specifics, as you heard, are yet to be discussed. As you know, the leaders are meeting shortly in Washington. Before the talks, Brussels spelled out its expectations.
We must have strong security guarantees to protect both Ukraine and Europe's vital security interests. Ukraine must be able to uphold its sovereignty and its territorial integrity.
Welcome back. You're watching Nation at 5 here on CNN News 18. We have some breaking news that's now coming in. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has just met with Shubhanshu Shukla is what we're given to understand. But before we get to those details, we'll get you more updates on Prime Minister Modi's phone call with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Prime Minister Modi, in fact, has taken to social media, has taken to X, where he's put out and confirmed that he has, in fact, spoken with President Putin. He said, I thank my friend for his phone call and for sharing insights on his recent meeting with President Trump in Alaska. India has consistently called for a peaceful resolution of the Ukraine conflict and supports all efforts in this regard. That's a confirmation that has come to the fore from Prime Minister Modi. This also comes ahead of the crucial meeting between US President Donald Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Siddhant, my colleague, now joins us, getting us more details. Siddhant, the timing of this phone call between Prime Minister Modi and Vladimir Putin is significant, isn't it?
Well, very, very significant, Poonam, and also this has to do with India's principal position. India has maintained principal position as far as war in Ukraine is concerned, Poonam, from the very beginning, which is that solution needs to be found through dialogue and diplomacy, and any decision taken should be taken in presence of all these stakeholders. Perhaps Prime Minister Modi was the first world leader to tell this to President Putin during the SCO meeting in 2022 that this is not an era of war. So India from a very beginning has played a very, very positive and constructive role when it comes to ending war in Ukraine. In fact, last year when Prime Minister Modi visited Moscow to meet President Putin, perhaps he is the only world leader to sit next to President Putin and tell him that children are dying in the war. So as far as India's role in this conflict is concerned, India has always played a very positive and constructive role, whether it's helping or rather contributing to the Black Sea agreement, which was signed between the two parties. India played a role in that as well. And in fact, Prime Minister Modi has always remained in touch with President Putin as far as development in Ukraine is concerned. And now we are getting to know that President Putin has dialed Prime Minister Modi and to share insights on his meeting with President Trump in Alaska. India has consistently called for a peaceful resolution of the Ukraine conflict and supports all efforts in this regard. In fact, Indian government has also come up with a statement supporting meeting in Alaska.
Right.
Also, Poonam, the context to it could be, the kind of commentary coming from the Trump administration that one of the factors contributed to bring Putin to the tables for the talk was sanctioning India with 25% additional penalty. So that is what Trump administration has been claiming.
Which is also why these talks between Prime Minister Modi and Vladimir Putin are also significant. Siddhant, do stay on with us. Zaka Jacob also joining us for more perspective. Zaka, do break down this for our viewers of how significant this phone call is, because both Prime Minister Modi and Putin spoke before the Alaska summit and afterwards as well.
Yeah, so I think it's underlining the importance that India is associating with a close and a quick resolution to this Ukraine conflict. Like you said, just before President Putin left for Alaska, he had a phone call with Prime Minister Modi, and now right after returning from Alaska, there's been another phone call just to apprise him of what was discussed between President Trump and President Putin. I think it's very clear that the overall peaceful agreement that President Putin suggested to President Trump, which he believes is the way that Russia wants to end this war, is by asking Ukraine to give up control of nearly, if not all, of Donbas, which is the eastern region where much of the fighting has been happening over the last 3 years. Putin believes that the Donbas historically has been Russian territory. There are Russian-speaking people there. And in any future peace agreement, a Donbas will be the land swap that even President Trump has been referring to. So Donbas is the region that has to be given up by Ukraine if it wants a quick end to this war. India, of course, has huge skin in this game. The additional 25% oil tariffs, the secondary tariffs as it's known, was imposed on India precisely because of the import of Russian oil. India, of course, put out a statement saying it's up to India, and to protect the interests of Indian consumers, India is free to choose where it wants to buy its oil from. It also, in that MEA statement, had pointed out the amount of business that the United States and Russia do, and also the amount of business between Europe and Russia. So clearly, I think India is very much a stakeholder in this, directly, if not indirectly, certainly is a stakeholder because of these secondary tariffs. And you heard from Trump, he said it on multiple occasions in the run-up to Alaska and after the summit with President Putin. His people have been speaking about it. Witkoff, in fact, spoke to CNN, and he said the reason why India had to face these sanctions was because of trying to get Putin to the table. So the feeling seems to be that India has very much a huge stake in ending this war and ending this war quickly, because once that happens, once we get to that point where this war can end, then two things happen. One, President Trump can claim credit for ending a significant war on his watch, and two, the strategy of sort of putting sanctions on India or tariffs on India to try and get Russia to concede or Russia to, agree to the terms.
Well, I think it is important that Emmanuel Macron has come to this. He came to this idea late, I have to say. He did try a lot in the beginning of the war to make his own diplomacy with Putin and was pushed aside. So I think the other thing Zelensky will have to remind Trump, with the help of Europeans, is that Donald Trump has said very explicitly the United States doesn't want to give any more money to help fund